This past summer, we saw stars like Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, and Damian Lillard get traded. These deals affected 7 organizations in particular, and in today's video, we're going to be giving each of these teams a grade for the early returns on their moves. I'm going to start with the team I gave the lowest grade to, and work my way up to the team I've been most impressed with. Before we get into it, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season, and your support goes a long way. With all of that being said, let's get into the video. The worst grade I'm handing out is a D+ to the Warriors. When Draymond punched Jordan Poole in the face, it messed everything up. Golden State's chemistry was awful last year, so in the offseason they traded Poole for an experienced veteran in CP3. The thought was that Chris Paul would come in and improve the second unit, which was a huge area of weakness for them. Unfortunately, Paul's impact hasn't been felt because the Warriors as a whole have been disappointing. In recent years, the front office has tried to execute a 2-timeline strategy, and it hasn't worked. Their 2022 championship was won on the backs of their veterans, and they should have prioritized bringing in experienced players. Poole was the one young guy that contributed to that title run, but after that incident with Draymond, things were never the same. As a result, Golden State had to trade their best young player plus picks just to get a 38-year-old Chris Paul. The saving grace of this trade is that CP3's contract offers the team financial flexibility. Poole still has 4 years left on his contract, while Paul's deal isn't guaranteed past this season. Maybe Golden State fills out their roster with depth next summer, but you can't say with certainty that they'll get every free agent they want. Over the past 2 seasons, this team has experienced so much turmoil, and Paul's contract offers them nothing more than the possibility of improving in the offseason. Steph Curry is not getting any younger, and after winning a title in 2022, it looks like they're going to waste back-to-back years of his prime. Moving on to the Grizzlies, they're getting a C for the Marcus Smart trade. This was a pretty bold move on Memphis's part. They gave up one of their most reliable players in Tyus Jones, and they also traded 2 first-rounders, one of which was Golden State's first in 2024, for a player that will be 30 by the end of the season. I understand Jones was entering the final year of his contract, while Smart had 3 years left on his deal, but Jones helped make up for Memphis's shortcomings. When you compare Smart and Jones side by side, Smart is the better player, but as we've seen so far this season, he's not the better pure point guard. Sure, Marcus Smart did win Defensive Player of the Year in 2022, and the idea of playing him next to Jaren Jackson seemed enticing, but the thing is, Memphis already had an elite defense. They were second in defensive rating last year, so adding Smart didn't necessarily fill a need for them. It feels like the Grizzlies were trying to rush things simply because they had shown promise the past few seasons. When they acquired Smart, Ja had already been suspended for the first 25 games of the year, so this season seemed like a write-off. If they had stayed patient, they could have still had Tyus, and that Warriors pick which may end up in the lottery. Now the Blazers have that pick, and instead of Memphis having 2 lottery selections in 2024, it's looking like Portland will. The Grizzlies gave up a lot to get Smart, and in a competitive Western Conference, it doesn't seem like this move made them any better. We'll have to see how this team looks at full health, but the early returns seem to indicate that Memphis will regret this trade. Not too far ahead of Memphis is Washington, who gets a C+ for their moves. I'm still a little torn on the Wizards, because on one hand, they could have gotten more for Porzingis and Beal, but their return wasn't as bad as I initially thought. Kristaps' value was extremely high last season, and Washington was not competing for anything significant. I know he was in the final year of his contract, but they could have gotten a better return if they had traded him before the deadline. Instead, Porzingis' career year got them a few expiring contracts, a second rounder, and Tyus Jones. Jones will likely net them a first rounder at the deadline, but still, this trade was nothing special for the Wizards. If that wasn't enough, the Wizards did the same exact thing with Bradley Beal. Realistically, Beal should have been traded 2 or 3 years ago. Instead, they held onto him for far too long and settled for Jordan Poole and a bunch of picks. Initially, Poole seemed like a solid player to bring in, but he's been a major disappointment thus far. I can live with Poole's inefficient shooting, but I can't brush off the immaturity and poor body language he's shown. He's been a bit better as of late, but he's generally looked disinterested this year, and considering the Wizards will be a bad team for at least the next few seasons, I don't expect that to change anytime soon. Despite this, there were some positives from the Beal trade. The deal allowed them to move up one spot in the 2023 draft and select Bilal Coulibaly, and they got 2 valuable pick swaps in 2028 and 2030 from the Suns. By that point, KD will be retired, and Devin Booker will be entering his mid-30s. There's a chance those turn into good picks for Washington, but it's not guaranteed, which is why they're only getting a C+. One of the teams they negotiated with, the Phoenix Suns, are also receiving a C+. This summer, Phoenix got rid of CP3, Ayton, and draft capital, and brought in Bradley Beal and a collection of role players. On paper, this seemed like a good haul. Chris Paul was aging, DeAndre Ayton didn't want to be there, and after trading for KD, the Suns clearly didn't care about having draft picks. While this is a talented roster, it's hard to give them a good grade when they simply haven't played together. The trio of Booker, KD, and Beal has played 1 full game together, and we're approaching the halfway point of the season. Beal has been injury prone over the past few years, so his availability was a legitimate concern when Phoenix acquired him. Out of their 3 stars, Durant has played in the most games so far, but he's also dealt with injuries in recent years. Obviously, I'm not hoping for it, but in all likelihood, KD will suffer some sort of injury that keeps him out for a few weeks. If their best players are constantly in and out of the lineup, this trio won't have much time to build chemistry ahead of the playoffs. Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, and Jordan Goodwin have been solid additions, but this team isn't competing if Beal isn't healthy, and if they can't improve their defense. The Suns are still adjusting to Frank Vogel's defensive schemes, and without Beal, they aren't going to be a top-tier offense. I still have some hope for the Suns, which is why I'm not giving them a terrible grade, but in a deep Western Conference, you need things to go smoothly in order to contend, and year 1 of this experiment has been anything but smooth. Obviously, the Suns have been disappointing, but in contrast, Portland's offseason moves are aging well. Even though a deal took forever to complete, I'm still giving the Blazers a B on their return for Dame. Initially, people weren't too impressed with the pieces Portland received. However, in totality, they got quite a lot. They got an unprotected pick plus 2 pick swaps from the Bucks, and they were able to flip Jrue Holiday for some nice assets. In exchange for Holiday, they got Brogdon, who will net them another pick, Rob Williams, who's a good center when healthy, and 2 first-rounders from Boston. One of those picks is the Warriors 2024 first-rounder, which is only top 4 protected. As I've discussed, there's a chance Golden State misses the playoffs and gives Portland a second lottery pick. On top of all that, they got a solid young center in DeAndre Ayton, and Toumani Camara, who looks like he'll be a good rotation player for a long time. The Blazers aren't getting an A for this deal because, like Washington, they held onto their star up until they requested a trade. A few years ago, anyone could have told you that Portland's title hopes were non-existent. The Blazers still got a good return for Dame, but if they had dealt him a few years earlier, they could have gotten an even better package. Speaking of Dame, the next team on this list is the one he was traded to, who is getting an A. During the offseason, Giannis seemed very non-committal about his future in Milwaukee. With just 2 years remaining on his contract, the Bucks had to do something to convince him to stay long-term. By trading for Lillard, Milwaukee was able to do just that. A few days before the season, Giannis signed a 3-year extension with the Bucks, giving them a larger window to compete. That extension alone was enough to warrant a high grade, but their play on the court has been great as well. While Milwaukee was very up and down to start the year, they've been doing much better as of late. Through their first 9 games, they went 5-4, but since then they've gone 15-3. They're starting to look like the championship contender we expected them to be, and other teams should be worried about them come playoff time. The only reason they aren't getting an A+ is because they don't appear to be the favorites in the league, or even in their own conference. The Timberwolves and Thunder have surprised everyone, the Nuggets are still a major threat, and as good as Milwaukee has been, Boston is ahead of them in the standings. What makes things worse is that Jrue Holiday, who was involved in the Dame trade, is now on that first-place Celtics team. He seems to have a chip on his shoulder this year, and he's going to be motivated to eliminate the Bucks if they meet up in the conference finals. Acquiring Lillard was enough to keep Giannis long-term, and it's extended their championship window by 1 to 2 seasons. However, this team has their weaknesses, most notably on defense, and the one team ahead of them on this list doesn't seem to have a major hole. If you hadn't figured it out yet, The last remaining team is Boston, who's getting an A+ from me. Ever since they drafted Jason Tatum, the Celtics have been a great team, but they haven't been able to get over the hump. Over his first 6 seasons, Boston has lost in the conference finals 3 times, and once in the NBA finals as well. They could have run it back this year, but it looks like bringing in Holiday and Porzingis was the right decision. The Celtics are undefeated at home, and at the making of this video, they're ranked top 5 in both offensive and defensive rating. Boston was an elite team the past few seasons, but this year they seem to be more dynamic. Kristaps gives them an elite inside-out threat, and Jrue Holiday is essentially a better shooting, more in-control version of Marcus Smart. After losing Grant Williams, Rob Williams, and Malcolm Brogdon, there were some concerns about Boston's bench depth, but they've had guys step up. Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, and Luke Cornett have exceeded expectations, and Al Horford brings experience to that second unit. On top of all that, Boston has a $6.2 million trade exception from the Grant Williams sign-and trade, and they still own their 2024 first-round pick. If the Celtics wanted to bring in another role player, they could trade for guys like Dean Wade, Nick Richards, or Kenrich Williams. The buyout market is also an option for them, so as good as they've been, they have the ability to get even better. I could go on and on about how great the Celtics have been, and for that reason they're deserving of the highest grade on this list. Boston is currently the first seed in the East, and this might be the year they win it all. Anyways, that's going to be all for today's video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. With all of that being said, I'm out, and I'll see you in the next video.